Hello everyone. Before we get into this episode, it's important for you to remember to be empathetic and understanding for every single guest that I have on this show. If you enjoy this content, please make sure to subscribe and follow because I do release weekly videos every single week. Otherwise, enjoy the show. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep Dives into the Minds of Esports. My name is Blake Panashevitz, and today's guest was previously a content creator and an analyst for San Francisco Shock. Now he's riding high as the coach and director of operations, having the privilege to work with one of the best all-Korean rosters in the Overwatch League, the Vancouver Titans. Please let me introduce Harsha Bandi, maybe better known as just Harsha. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. Everybody gives me really like flowery introductions. I feel like it's really, I don't know, overbearing.
Overbearing. I have to make my guest look good, like starting the show up, because if I don't, right, then everyone's gonna like watch it and they're gonna be like, why the fuck am I watching this person? Like, who are they? Why should I watch them? So I try to make it a little bit entertaining, and I'm really excited to have you on the show. I've been wanting to actually have you on the show since I started the show. You were one of the first people I kind of approached, and our time schedules just never really worked out. So I'm really happy to have you on the show. And I always like to start off the show fairly simple with a fairly easy question, and I want to kind of throw it to you like this. So we actually suffer from opposite problems. Okay, I look like a 12-year-old child, and I'm 27, and you look like you're probably 35, but you're actually not. How does it feel knowing that you can just change ages by having a beard in an instant?
So I'm really fickle about my beard too. I guess like people notice I shave like really often and then just grow it back really often. So it's funny when people think I'm like, I don't know, I'll go out and people always ask for my IDs and stuff like that. And then when I grow my beard, they all just assume, you know, oh, he's old enough. So it's also weird talking to women because sometimes they all think like, oh, wow, he's way too young. And then sometimes they all think like, I don't know, he looks like an older guy. So I don't know, it's more funny than anything. Like, it's just amusing. I need to find like a middle ground where I look my age or, you know, slightly above my age rather than constantly like older or younger, I think.
You're 23, right?
23, yeah. Just
okay. Okay, so 23. The whole like beard aspect, and you mentioned like talk. Is it easier to talk to ladies when you're an old man, or is it easier to talk to ladies when you were a 12-year-old? Because I know that when I was dating, and thank God I found someone for the last 5 years, and I just haven't let her go because I'd be screwed. But when I was dating, it was a struggle because it was like. I had someone the other day who came into the house because I ordered some whiskey, and he was like, how old are you? Because I can't give this to anyone who's under 21. And I'm like, yeah, no, dude, I'm 27. I wish.
I don't know which one is easier because now that you phrase it that way, one of them just sounds like really creepy, and the other one sounds like like you're a kid talking to like older women. So I don't think there is like a good answer.
Oh, I can't complain about that. So I'm really excited to get into some of this stuff. So I was looking through your history, and there's not a ton out there on you. And the only reason I know some stuff about you is because we've talked before. So if I remember this correctly, and I might remember this wrong, you're from Texas, right?
Yeah, I'm actually in Texas right now.
Okay. So where are you from in Texas?
Houston.
Okay, Houston, Texas. Too bad you weren't in the Outlaws, right? That would have been like just so...
Well, good thing I'm not in the Outlaws this year.
That's true. Yeah, okay, that's fair. But you missed out on that lovely tax rate, right? Like
that's
because I mean, right now you have to deal with Canada's tax rates, right?
So right now I have to deal with California tax, which is you know
next year
still abnormally high. Next year I have to deal with Canadian tax. Yeah.
Okay, and obviously Texas doesn't have any income tax, which is why it's nice if you're in Texas. I've looked at possible places that I might want to move to, so that are
a good area.
Yeah, so where you grew up in Houston, what is Houston like for people who have never been there? Okay, because the only visual that we see from Overwatch is obviously Houston fans, and that's a fucking nightmare sometimes.
I feel like Houston fans aren't really representative of Houston. It feels more like K-pop fans or that kind of fan base. Just because it's like a bunch of, you know, attractive boys, and you know it's just a bunch of like female fans that kind of follow them. That's sort of the impression I get, and a lot of other people get. I feel like Houston, I like it a lot. It's like a big city, but instead of when you think of New York and you think of LA or San Francisco, big cities like that, you think of like really cramped areas, I feel like. And Houston isn't cramped at all. It's like there's a lot of space and it's a big city.
Mm-hmm.
So I just like it better than other big cities for that reason. But also, it does feel like there's less to do. At night you kind of just go to bars and that's about it. So I mean, not that that's bad, but it's definitely not like LA, not like New York. The only complaint I'd have is the weather. The humidity is just terrible. But I like Houston overall, I feel like.
Yeah, that is one thing. When I moved to LA, is the weather in LA is something I still miss because obviously in Michigan it's snowing or it's raining, and then you get like 2 months of like nice weather, and that's it, and then the rest is just garbage, and you're like, kill me, please. So, but I imagine that in Texas is just hot as fucking balls all the time.
So Houston's like bipolar, where it's sometimes just really hot, sometimes it's like 20 degrees, and the roads are all icy, and it could just be like interspersed. So it could be like one day it's super hot, the next day it's cold. Normally during the summer it's just always hot, but it also like rains quite a bit. Right now I'm inside my house with the AC on, with a fan on, and I'm sweating. So that's Houston.
That's terrible. So growing up in Houston, I have to ask, do you have any brothers or sisters?
I have a younger sister.
Okay, how much younger is she?
She's 4 years younger than me.
Okay, 4 years younger than you. So you're growing up in Houston, and you're an older brother. Were you a protective older brother? What kind of older brother were you? Because I have a younger brother, and we're about 4 years, and we're fairly close.
I'd say a bit protective, but not like overbearing or anything like that. My sister's also a lot more well behaved, I'd say, than I am. So like I don't really have to worry about anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have to be overprotective, I guess is my point.
Okay.
I'm like close with her, but not like, not extremely close, I'd say.
Okay, so you mentioned that you weren't a fairly good child.
Okay, when I say that, I mean I wasn't like rowdy or anything like that, but I definitely wasn't. I guess I'd say the standard American youth.
What does that look like? Right? Like let's go into that a little bit. Because I mean, like my brother, he was like, if you compare me and my brother was a lot more in trouble in school than I was. Whereas I was this geeky kid who kind of just did school and got picked on. He was the kid who, when people picked on him, he like destroyed their nose. Like I remember one kid, he literally headbutt him because he got punched by him, and so he headbutts him and he destroyed all the cartilage in the kid's nose, and he had to get like reconstructive surgery for the next like 18 years of his life. So like,
that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So
I've never done anything like that.
like when we say, like, what does it look like?
So I actually, in school, I generally got like very good grades, like up until I would say the end of high school, where I started kind of, I don't know, I got more disinterested in school, like throughout high school. And that's kind of also the time where my parents were pushing really hard for me to focus on school. So it kind of worked out counterintuitively, where the more they pushed me, like the less interested I got in it. And then ended up in college where my grades were just kind of pretty poor, like way worse than I should have been doing, honestly. I was a pre-med student, so it's where grades are like super important. And that's also the time where I started playing League of Legends, actually. So I would say growing up, I always balanced gaming, school, like a social life. I balanced it pretty well. I would think I was fine in all of those departments. In high school, I could go out and I could make good grades, and I could also play video games, And then in college, like when I was on my own, my balance just shifted all the way to like a social life and a gaming life. And then my school life was just like kind of going down. And then I started dropping my social life too. So it just became all gaming. Luckily, that's when I realized, hey, I want to kind of have a future in gaming, and this is possible. And ended up finding Overwatch. And I kind of just jumped in as soon as I could into Overwatch. And yeah, it led to where I am now. So I got kind of lucky, I would say.
Yeah, that I can't wait to tell some of that story leading up to that. So looking at school, what kind of kid were you going through school? Where, like, you mentioned that you went to Houston. I imagine you first of all went to a huge school, right?
So I went to like what people would call like a good school, like a private school. It's a Christian school. It's well known, but it's not like huge. They're only about like 150, 200 people in a grade. In a graduating class rather, and it builds up to that. So I guess in school, I'm someone that never actually put any. It's kind of bad to say. I was never putting any effort into school. Honestly, like grades kind of came effortlessly to me. Even going to like what people would consider like a prestigious school, and then all of a sudden it started going kind of downhill. I would say towards the end of my time in like high school, but it didn't really matter. You know, I was putting in college applications, got into, I'd say, a reasonable college, and yeah, I think that, I guess as a student, I guess the best way to just describe me is I didn't put that much effort in, and I should have put in more probably.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people who are like that, where they just naturally can get to grades, and I hated those people growing up because I was not one of them. And then what ended up happening is when college hit, that was about the time where their grades started dipping because they weren't used to actually having to put in this work.
Yeah,
and I was just like, it was like status quo, right? And so like then they started struggling.
It definitely, that describes me pretty well, because when I got to college, I had no sense of like time management. I never needed to like manage my time because I just spent all of it on you know, my interests rather than school. And so when it came to actual, like, you know, pre-med is a lot of just like memorization, like all the classes are just really like, I feel like it's not really like learning, it's more just like studying and kind of putting down like the correct answer rather than like applying things. I feel like applying things has always been my strong suit, but just like memorization is it's something where I'm always like a crammer, I guess. And that's not very good when you're trying to, when you're doing pre-med, I would say. So definitely I struggled a lot in college. I feel like I never really got those skills. And actually working in Overwatch League is what kind of taught me to manage time much better than I was. I still have problems, I would say, with that, with like cramming or, you know, waiting till the last minute, but definitely I learned a lot more working than I did in college.
Yeah, I can agree with that. It didn't take me. It took me like my third or fourth year before I finally actually grasped college and like how you're actually supposed to handle it. But one of the things you actually mentioned is you went to a private Christian school. It was kind of fairly. What did your parents do for a living?
So both of them are doctors, like classic Indian parents.
I didn't want to make assumptions because that's pretty rude. So are they from what generation are you then? And what generation?
I'm the first one that was born in America.
Okay, so they came from India then.
They came from India, yeah.
Okay. Did you ever go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say both of them are like very much the hard, like the stereotypical hardworking immigrants that like came with like no money and then you know, were able to provide for their family. So there's definitely a contrast, I would say, between how they were brought up and how not necessarily how they raised me, but how I kind of I guess my general attitude towards schooling and stuff like that.
So have you been to India? Have you got to travel back there? Because I imagine you have lots of family over in India then.
Yes. I've been 4 times, I think. I'm not really particularly a fan of it. I know a lot of people always say, oh, you have to travel to India, you have to check it out. It's amazing. I go to the areas where my parents grew up, and I mean, my dad came from a pretty poor family, and so not necessarily the best area. It's super crowded. You know, there are homeless people everywhere, which is it's super sad to see. But yeah, his area definitely was nothing like what I grew up in. My mom came from a better off family, like pretty well off family, I would say, and then like I think her situation's a bit different, but I'm not really a fan of visiting India in general.
Okay, and then I am very uncultured. What language? It's not in. Is it?
They
Indian?
speak a bunch of languages. So both my parents are able to speak a language called Telugu, and then my mom speaks Telugu and Hindi. So it's that's like the national language of India. Okay. I think there's just a ton of languages though.
Do you speak Hindi then, or
it's like a situation where I can understand anything they say in Telugu, but the grammar, it's just like above me. So I know all the words, but it's just I can't put together the sentences.
Okay, so you can understand it, but you can't actually.
Honestly, I can. My Korean is pretty much like at that same level, except I have a better grasp on Korean grammar now. So yeah, even though I grew up around like Telugu my whole life, I never learned it. I say that's partially on me, partially on my parents, because they didn't really care to teach me, and it's fine. Like it's not something that I regret too much, but would be cool to just know more languages, I guess.
Okay. Did you guys maintain any customs like from?
Yeah.
India? Like, what are some customs that people might not know about that you guys kind of do that would be kind of unique?
Okay, customs, I guess. I mean, I played like a traditional Indian instrument growing up for a long time. I was pretty good at it, but I dropped that in high school when I started focusing more on gaming. So, common trend here, dropping a lot of things for gaming. But there's it's kind of like the equivalent of bongos, but they have more, I think, more pitches. It's called the tabla. So I grew up playing that, and I played it for about like 12, 13 years. What else? I guess in terms of like, my parents are pretty religious. I'm not religious at all. But I mean, I still participate in like their customs just when I'm home and stuff like that, just because, it might as well.
Were they Christian? Because they sent you to a private
No.
Christian school.
They just sent me to the school because it's
Okay.
For Indian parents, they're always like, oh, go to the best school that you can go to. But no, they're both Hindi.
Okay. So
Hindu, sorry.
Was that ever an issue, like going to a Christian school? Like, first of all, did your Christian school make you practice Christian things? That's because some don't really.
You go to chapel, but they were very, I think, tolerant. They had like diversity days where they do like a different type of religion instead of Christianity in the chapel sometimes. So, it's just, I think it was a pretty tolerant place.
So you come from this traditional family. That must mean like school is got to be their number one focus on you growing up. Like, right?
Yeah. No question. School was like the only focus. Like, I always wanted to play sports when I was younger, and they'd be like, yeah, your friends can play sports, but you should be studying right now. Stuff like that. So yeah, they learn kind of from me that they probably need to take a bit less of a focus on school, and they kind of did that with my sister. So she's a better, I think, like they're more accepting of her social life. They're more accepting of her playing sports. They're more accepting of stuff like that. Whereas I was kind of like purely school. And eventually drove me to kind of hate school. I don't know if that's the reason or if that's just kind of my personality, but yeah, it's pretty much the situation I was in.
No, I think that's fairly common too. Like when someone pushes you to do something, because I had a very distaste for school for a long time. Actually, similar reasons. My mom would, I couldn't do sports. I really wanted to do sports, even though I don't think I would have ever been very good at sports in hindsight. But I wanted, and she pushed me towards the schooling, and then eventually I just was like, I don't even want to go to school. I just want to play in a band, and I don't want to go to college. Screw this, and missed out and got tricked into college. But what kind of sports do you think? What kind of sports do you think you would have played?
So I ended up playing a lot of sports in high school, actually. And it's just that, like, growing up, I never was able to when I was like a younger kid. And I think that's a little bit regrettable, but also, I guess it's kind of like a weird situation where like I got pushed into things just because of kind of what my parents allowed me to or didn't allow me to. And that's not to say that they were like, I mean, they were really strict growing up. They're a lot more accepting now.
Yeah.
But like, let's say, for example, when they didn't let me play sports, I played, I ended up playing football, basketball. I started wrestling. I played tennis, lacrosse. Like I played a lot of sports in high school and started working out really actively in high school. I remember actually a moment because I grew up a really small kid. Like my dad is like 5'3", my mom's 5 foot, and I'm significantly taller than either of them. I think combined they might weigh like 10 more pounds than I weigh right now. So like that's kind of what the stature we're talking about. I remember my football coach in like I think 8th grade. I got ran over on a play. I was like giving up an extra point as the last play of the game. We'd already won the game. I was just standing in the end zone, and like the other team's running back just barreled over me when I wasn't trying to tackle him. I was just letting him go. I remember our coach going, "Why do you have to run over the smallest kid on the team?" And after that, I was always like, "Oh wow, like I'm tiny," so that kind of pushed me to work out, stuff like that.
That's hilarious, actually. Like, because you're fairly like you're close to 6 foot, right?
I'm like 5'10"
Yeah. Okay. So we're like very close. You're like 2 inches taller. Because I know you're taller than me. I just can't remember how much you're taller than me.
Like barely, yeah.
So because I'm 5'8", so. But I was like, wow, the fact that your parents are like almost 5 foot, like 5'3", 5'4", that's pretty short. So kind of looking at school and growing up, was there any other activities that you kind of really you really like went to or really found to be like your passion, something that you enjoyed in school?
In school,
Yeah.
I was always good at math, but I wouldn't say I liked it. Like
Okay.
I was somebody that took like super advanced math courses for my age, but no, honestly, I'll like being very honest. School was just something I'd go to, finish, and then go home and play video games or whatever it was.
Okay.
So
So like, what kind of video games would you play?
I
Because
started out
League of Legends
playing.
isn't out yet.
Yes, I started out playing actually Nintendo games like quite a bit. I have like the original DS, like a Wii, a
Mhm.
3DS. I still sometimes play Nintendo games if I have them. I don't have a Switch, but probably something I'll buy at some point. Um, so yeah, I've always kind of like loved Nintendo, but what ended up happening, this is like a really convoluted story actually. So what ended up happening is I got reintroduced to Pokemon in my freshman year of high school. Like that was a game, a series that I always loved, and then I think at the time Pokemon Black and Pokemon White were coming out.
Mhm.
So I picked that up, and then I started playing competitively, and I got really good at the competitive side of Pokemon, to the point where I was like, where all my friends in high school, like the friends in high school that convinced me to buy these games, suddenly like, they played a little bit of competitive to a point, but like they weren't really into it. I
Mhm.
got super into it, like joined like the site for all the best players, ended up like ranking up there. I'm still like a fairly well known member on that site actually from like 2010, 2011, but was one of like the better players in the world, I'd say. And then that introduced like my group of friends from that online community. A lot of them played Smash Bros, so I started playing Super Smash Bros Melee. This is around the time that like the documentary came out about Super Smash
Mhm.
Bros Melee, the pretty well known one. Um, so I was playing competitively in tournaments in Houston, and then eventually that led to League of Legends. Like my online friends were playing League of Legends. I started playing League of Legends. We all got super into the LCS, and that's kind of what convinced me. Like, hey, I've kind of been into gaming all my life. I've been into competitive gaming for a long time now. Like,
Mhm.
this is I've realized that this is the only thing that I'm excessively passionate about. So that's kind of why I chose
Yeah.
to pursue that.
Mhm. At what point did you realize that? At what point did? So this is one of the things that actually, funny. You should check this with your players sometimes, or other players in general. One of the things I've noticed talking to people so much is there's generally a point where video games greatly take over the rest of their life. For most players that I've talked to, it's normally between like 14 and 17 are like the ages that you see like pro players. That's when like video games their time invested in video games shifted. Do you think that there was a point for that for you where that you kind of like shifted and that was the only thing that really mattered?
Video games are always probably one of the top two most important things I would say in my life. From like 6 years old, 7 years old, like I
Hmm.
very early on was playing like I had a Game Boy
Yeah.
or whatever, and was just playing video games all the time when I was home. I would say that competitive video games kind of took over my life in my freshman year of college, though. Like the first time I kind of had where I was just on my own, like living on my own.
Hmm.
I was really bad. Obviously, as I mentioned like earlier, I was really bad at time management, and so that's when like League of Legends just basically fully took over.
Yeah. So looking at your end of high school, were you still hanging out with friends or stuff, or were you kind of just more
Yeah,
into gaming? Okay.
no, I was hanging out with friends all the time. But it's like when you go to college, you move away from all of your
Yeah.
friends, right?
Exactly.
So that's when you start. You're supposed to start getting new friends. I made a few new friends, but I made a good amount of new friends, I would say. But it's still like that
Yeah.
was a point where video games were just more important to me than I think like a social life or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're looking at going into college, right? Your grades have been kind of dropping. What is it that you think you want to do for the rest of your life? Because I know when I was 18, I was like, I don't know what the fuck I'm gonna do.
I didn't know either. I just kind of started like that pre-med path just because my parents did it. Like it's what I was kind of
Mhm.
trained to do all my life. We live in Houston, which is like literally our area is literally right next to I think the biggest medical center in like the world. I've been
Mhm.
interning there since I was in like middle school. It just kind of seemed like I had to kind of follow this path. Um, I honestly didn't have anything I was like passionate about, so I was like, okay, you know what, like maybe one day I'll find what I'm passionate about, but right now, like this is the only thing I can think of, so I'll just
Mhm.
pursue it. And looking back, like maybe that was a time where I should have considered like, this is never something I would have done. But in hindsight, like maybe I should have taken some time off to think about what I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
But it's just something I put off for a really long time, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people actually, like a lot of people I've talked to, they're like, I really wish I could have went back and just taken the year off, especially with like school debt and shit like that.
Yeah.
Like once you get started, like if you stop, there are some significant consequences for stopping because you don't have a job, plus you have school debt.
Yeah.
So it's like a very, very bad kind of like situation going in there. So you're thinking about doing this pre-med and following your parents' path. Did you ever think about like diverting from that?
Yeah, all the time. But I whenever I thought about it, I was like, okay, what would I do? And I would always just blank out. Like there's nothing else for me. It's actually when I started following esports very closely, like I was just thinking a lot about League of Legends like all the time, the pro scene or whatever, and that's when I was like, okay, maybe I'll try journalism because that sounds fun. And I guess people will know I started out as a journalist in Overwatch. So at the time I was like, okay, how can I change my school training? Maybe I can go get like a degree in journalism and like formally train in that. That's something my school actually didn't allow. You had to follow like a very specific, like a path for journalism. And I don't know why, like, I don't, if I'd switched to that, maybe I could have actually enjoyed school, but, unfortunately that wasn't something that was possible. So I was like, okay, I'll just get a degree as soon as possible. And then, finish that, then go get some training in journalism at least, then go become an esports journalist, right? This is actually, and I guess potentially this is probably what you were going to ask about later on, but I'll just talk about it since it kind of like leads into that. But basically, at the time, I also wanted to get like a deeper understanding of Overwatch because I was covering the game as a journalist. I was like, okay, I want to be, an expert on the game. So I want to have all the experience I can get. I started coaching like tier 3 teams, tier 2 teams. And that's actually when I was making like analytical videos. Me and I would say Sideshow were like the only two that were doing it at the time.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of when a team reached out to me. They're like, hey, do you want to trial with us? And that was shock. So that's kind of what led to that path. And, now I don't think journalism is, it just doesn't look fun. Journalists are in a really bad spot, I would say right now, especially, I'm not a fan of how current media works. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that's a route I would enjoy going down, but it was what led to me diverting from, my pre-med course and finding something I actually was passionate about.
Mm-hmm. Let's sidestep into that a little bit and let's talk about maybe journalism because that's something that you were passionate about for a little while. You did some journalism. I remember hearing, even though I wasn't involved with Overwatch at the time, about like you getting rejected from, I believe it was
the BlizzCon.
BlizzCon. I had heard about that, and like I wasn't even involved with. I was like into League of Legends. I was interviewing with League of Legends teams at the time when all of that stuff was going. Overwatch was like I was like I'm never getting into this game. I tried playing it. I didn't like it, and then lo and behold, I ended up getting a job at Overwatch, and I love it. Right. But that being said, like I had heard about this stuff, so. Journalists, I will agree with you, is in a very interesting and kind of poor spot, both if you look at the climate of the way it seems like Blizzard treats journalists, as well as like just the scene overall and like the financials behind it. So when you look at journalism, what are the problems that you really have with kind of journalism and the way that it's being portrayed now?
I have so many issues with it. Like,
we got time, man, so...
First of all, let's think about like, without looking at the problems of what the journalists are doing themselves. Mm-hmm. Journalism itself doesn't seem very profitable. I can't imagine how you monetize journalism well. There are a lot of sites that have been around for a while, like I guess Deserto and like, I don't know. We saw like VP Esports recently closed down after just like a year of being around. There's so many sites that are just like that. I don't know how ESPN funds their esports journalism. So specifically esports journalism, but even just like general online media, like ad revenue isn't enough to cut it. Sponsorships are, pretty unethical. Just like there's so many problems with like monetizing it that it just creates very few opportunities unless you're just going to work for ad revenue. Like a site like Esports Heaven, I guess, or Gosu Gamers or whatever it is. Over.gg paid me and Sideshow when we were there, and they paid us more than, like, significantly more money than we were worth. Like, we weren't bringing in that much. They they didn't even have ads at the time. I think it was just like a pet project by the owner, Enigma. So it was nice of him to do that, but he shouldn't have been paying us, honestly. And like then we talk about journalists themselves. They're so, I feel like, sensational. Like they'll you see so many things taken out of context. You see so many like there are a lot of journalists that just focus on like these political issues when that's not everything that there is to life. You know what I mean? Like especially when we talk about Overwatch, I feel like it's a huge, and maybe I'm not supposed to say that, but it just feels like there's a huge focus on like political issues rather than the game or like the players or whatever it is. So I don't know. I'm just really not a fan of what I see, and maybe it's just not for me. Maybe it's for other people. But when I got into gaming, I wanted it to be like about gaming, if that makes sense. So I guess seeing how do you frame it? Like, there's definitely important listening done in
a lot of it seems like tabloid. It seems very tabloid like. That is the best way to, that's the way I always try to describe it. It's when you get someone like Michael. Is it Michael or is it Mickle? I don't ever remember. Yeah, when you get someone like, he is quite literally like TMZ tabloid. Like, he's like Cosmos thrown at you.
He did such a good job with it.
He did.
He's the best example of monetizing like journalism in Overwatch, honestly. And honestly, people take way more of an issue with him than I do. He honestly, like, he didn't report accurately on my situation, and I guess we'll talk about that later. But I don't even have an issue with the guy. Like, he found a way to. Also, people think that he stole all of his leaks from a spreadsheet, which is just absolutely false. But like, I had no problems with the guy. He found a way to monetize journalism, so like, hats off to him.
Yeah.
Whether he did a good job or not, like, fair enough, that's debatable. But I found him entertaining.
I think if you view him as what he is, he wasn't like your investigative journalist. He was if you view him as Cosmo being thrown at you in a video format, and it's only there to make you like, that it's I can respect that. I can be like, not really for me, but I can respect the fact that you found a way to monetize something, as long as you're not out there being like, this is like. If you start acting like an investigative journalism, but you're doing it in this way, that's where I kind of have issues with it. But if you're going out there and you're like, listen, I'm this like tabloid thing, I'm going to give you all the drama and the hot leaks, like, I'm cool with that. That's fine.
Yeah. You just have to know what it is basically going in. But once you do, then, I don't have any issues with it whatsoever. So yeah, I think the other thing I want to say, and I want to clarify when I talk about, like, when I say it's all about politics, I don't mean stuff like, right now there's like the Riot Games walkout, which is actually like a super important issue. Or like, I don't know, I'm blanking right now, but there are definitely important issues that also have political leanings. But I just mean that, like, it feels like a lot of the time we're not focusing on the reason that people want, like, we're kind of taking one small issue and making it the whole picture, right? So that's just more or less what I mean.
Yeah, 100% can kind of go through it. So what do you think, besides the money aspect, right, which is probably honestly the biggest reason, what do you think how would you like to see journalism kind of changed, specifically related to Overwatch?
The thing is, I don't think it will. It's so hard to monetize, like, just good journalism. Like, I guess you can say that somebody like Jacob Wolf, or even, I guess, probably not supposed to be mentioned in this kind of area, but like Richard Lewis, right?
Yeah, these guys, I was actually thinking the same thing.
These guys do have really good track records, I would say. And so, but they're also the kind of people that aren't, they don't get the same upvotes on Reddit. Well, okay, Jacob Wolf doesn't get, he'll always get kind of the attention, right? But I just more or less mean that, like, it's so much easier to put out just like garbage every day, and people will consume it no matter what, right? Yeah. And you'll get more ad revenue than these big stories, most likely, unless it's just something massive that's, going to shake up all of esports, right? So it's just so much easier to do things poorly that I don't think it'll change.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I was actually thinking when we talk about like how to like where would I like to see journalists? I'd like to see journalists more on their own individual platforms, like kind of like a Richard Lewis almost. The only problem with that is normally editors have a huge like impact on obviously like both vetting sources as well as making sure that writing and everything is good. And so that's the only thing that is kind of, but I do like the idea of, almost like what Richard Lewis is doing where you have your own platform.
Yeah, I think so as well. But you definitely have to put in a lot of work. Like, I don't know, he's been around for like what 15 plus years, and his YouTube's been around for a long time as well. So like, let's say I'm somebody that has like, when I was active, I had like 3,000 subscribers on YouTube. Not very much, honestly, and definitely not like a livable thing, right? I still don't think I've gotten a check from YouTube. I might have made like barely over $100 from ad revenue, and that's from 2 years of probably content creation on YouTube. So it's definitely very hard, and you have to be very good at it, I think, to make it work.
Yeah, I think that's 100%. So you're in school and you're doing this. You're like, oh, journalism. I want to start getting involved. How did you kind of make your way into doing that? How did you get into like? Did you start paying to go to events? How did you get into that scene?
No, I started writing analytical articles about League of Legends, honestly. And there's a site, like a community site, where you could post them called Gamers, I think. I don't think it's around anymore. I think it's actually think so either. That company bought .esports. So that's actually, yes, there's some weird amalgamation right there. But basically, I was publishing to that site. I ended up like, what I think ended up happening was Gosu Gamers, who were running all the tournaments in early Overwatch, like the weekly tournaments, the Alienware monthly melee or whatever. They were looking for writers, and I kind of got fooled into thinking, hey, Gosu Gamers runs the tournaments. Maybe they do a good job with like their articles and stuff like that. So I kind of got fooled into that. They actually did have a pretty good staff, and they're like Sideshow wrote for them a little bit, just for fun. There's a guy called Nidra. I think he does a lot of other Blizzard games and I think Valve games. He was a good writer who came from Gosu Gamers. Like, they had some good writers, but it was a really terrible platform and they didn't pay or anything like that. So, but I was writing there and just putting out like either analytical videos, like interviews. I did a lot of interviews. I probably did, I would say, more interviews with pro players than anybody else at that period in time. I think that's fair to say. I actually can't even remember anybody else that was really actively. Sideshow did them, but his were generally like, he generally liked to go to events and meet the players and do the interviews there. So he obviously didn't have the same amount basically as I did. So I kind of just like worked my way up through Gosu Gamers, ended up, Sideshow and a guy named Admirable, who's from TF2, ended up reaching out to me and telling me, hey, do you want to come write for over.gg? We even pay money for articles. And I was like, oh, wow, that's crazy. So I ended up working with them and Enigma, who owns that site. And that's kind of where the journalism ended. I wrote for over.gg until the end, until like I, started coaching, and that's pretty much it.
Okay, so what made you say, okay, I have these two paths, I have journalism and I have coaching here, because you were obviously working on it to learn more about the game, to kind of enhance your journalism at the time. At what point are you like, you know what, I don't want to do anymore, I don't want to do this journalism thing anymore, and I just want to coach? So
it's more that I didn't mind journalism, honestly. Like, it was fun making content, it was fun interviewing players, it was fun like writing articles like about the history of, since I've been around for all of Overwatch, I know a lot of these players like history, right? So I definitely enjoyed it a lot. And I still enjoy writing, but it was just that like the shock offer came and I was like, okay, well, I can either make no money or I can make some money and work in Overwatch League. So I was like, okay, I'll just work in Overwatch League. And my kind of, my distaste for like, I don't know how media works, it just kind of grew while I was in Overwatch League. It wasn't really something that made me leave per se.
Okay, so that makes sense. Money does have some influence over people, I will say. Like, it's nice to be paid for things. Now, you started doing content on YouTube. One of the things that you actually mentioned when you started doing your content was a lot of it was to help you with public speaking. In order to do that, was that something that you were like really bad at? Did you struggle in social situations? Because like I know you now, obviously, and you're a very charismatic type guy. You're easy to talk to. You're easy to approach. before your YouTube, were you not someone who was like that?
Not really, to be honest. It's more that I just like stuttered a lot. I'd get lost in my train of thought. I still do sometimes, but and I still go on I still go on a lot of tangents when I talk, and sometimes like lose my point. But in general, like I mostly made YouTube as like a way to improve, just being more presentable, like in when I'm talking to a camera. I always thought like, hey, maybe the analyst desk is something I'd like to do in the future, and I've been in. There have been talks, like I went on Watch My recently just for fun, but it's never something that panned out. But that's mainly why I was doing YouTube content. It was kind of like, hey, I want to get better at this so that it could become a viable career path. I could become a YouTuber in the future if my brand grows, or I could become an analyst or whatever it is on the desk. It was mainly for that. I never did YouTube for like money or anything like that. Yeah. It was just more for fun, more to improve at speaking, I guess.
Okay, so kind of looking at your YouTube, that is one of the things that you kind of really let, I would say, fall by the wayside when you started coaching. You kind of gave up on it and kind of left it. Both probably, first of all, the time commitment to a YouTube is actually like, there's a lot of time commitment there.
Yeah.
And something that I've learned, and it's a very good experience, but I have to ask you, you mentioned like being a content creator possibly in the future or anything like that, but it's something that you let kind of fall to the side as something that isn't that important. Do you ever really want to be a content creator on YouTube? I could see you being on like Watchpoint or doing Desktop, but do you want to be someone who's making your own content all the time and dealing with that hassle?
I'd always want that to be something supplementary, and I think my brand isn't anywhere really near where it needs to be for me to kind of pursue that. So, I like doing analysis videos on YouTube, but like you said, it takes a long time, right? And I don't have that kind of time. To be honest, I barely have any free time like this year. Last year I had some, but I still didn't have that much. The other issue is that like I really don't like putting out analytical content because just when I'm working with teams, just because, those are advantages that I can keep to myself, keep with my team. Like I don't like giving away my strategies. I don't like giving away other team strategies because we could, make use of them. It's just unfortunately like it's a situation where I can't really win by doing all of it. So it's just better I feel like it's just better for me to kind of give up on some of the content. Now, I do have like, I've been thinking of like podcast ideas. We had Through the Grapevine. Honestly, Bren, Sideshow, and I like all had very hectic schedules last year. So I kind of fell by the wayside, but we never wanted to really cancel that. It just kind of was something that we couldn't really continue with our schedules. But I have podcast ideas and stuff like that, but we'll see if they pan out. Maybe there's a chance, but otherwise, like content is something that's just kind of secondary to me during the regular season, and then during the off season, that's normally when I try and put out more. I would say.
Now, you actually mentioned the podcast, and it was something I was going to bring up related to this content. You actually you had Through the Grapevine, but you also had a podcast called Around the Watch, right? I think I got the name right, with Captain Planet and Pesto Enthusiast, who you were doing that with. What kind of sparked that? Because that was probably a fairly big podcast that people like would turn. It was. I say fairly big in the sense of, but it was functionally what kind of like Kick Tripod and Yiska and Volomail have now. They've almost taken that mantle from you guys because you guys stopped doing it. What was the reason for stopping that? Is just because all of you guys got hired? Like,
it's because. Honestly, I felt too busy with Overwatch League season 1 to begin with. Like I felt like I couldn't really commit to podcasts anymore. And I learned time management and could have maybe later on in the season, but still it's very hard to make that work. The other thing is that Captain Planet works for Blizzard now, right? So he can't really have a podcast and be a Blizzard employee, I think is the way it works. So it kind of just couldn't live on. That one couldn't live on. The other one could have, but we just didn't have time to make it run, basically.
Okay. So kind of looking at that in the YouTube content and going from there. Now, kind of leads into you dropping that and you end up joining Shock, which was very fortunate, very lucky. A lot of hard work. I'm not going to discount that at all, but there's like anyone says there isn't luck involved. I have a very hard like I'm sorry. There's a lot of luck involved. You put yourself in those situations to where you could finally get lucky. So Like that's how it works. You just keep putting yourself out there, and hopefully, eventually, you win the lottery, and you increase the odds.
I've never. Don't worry, I've never discounted my luck in esports.
So that being said, you get into Shock, and Shock. I mean, you guys probably didn't have the season that you thought you were going to have, but to be fair, most people going into Overwatch League, I don't think really understood what they were getting themselves into.
So I actually kind of. This is kind of bad, but
no, go ahead.
Before the season started, before I was on Shock, I actually made a video about them because I used to make like the here's a roster reveal, these are my thoughts on the roster. I actually pretty much accurately predicted where Shock would be for the entire season 1 and season 2, where I said that, and obviously the roster changed a lot, the coaching staff changed a ton, and so it's not fair for me to just take all the credit for like predicting this, but I definitely said that there'd be a lower tier team. Stage 1, Stage 2, and then when Sinatra Super can play, would be a pretty good team. And then Season 2 is when they can, add on to what they thought worked, what they didn't think worked, and become an actual like powerhouse team. Mm-hmm. That is pretty much what happened. They made a lot more changes than I kind of gave credit for in that initial video. But it was definitely not a great team. But I feel like I learned a lot from the early experiences, and then when we became a good team. Stage 3, Stage 4, we were 6-4. Stage 3, I think, got the coaching change and then became even better, I feel like. Mm-hmm. So, when it became a good team, it was kind of what I expected, I would say, to be honest.
Yeah. And that was actually something I was going to ask you about, Shock. Like, things did not probably, like, they went through and you guys got better, but it was very stressful. It was... I know a lot of people just had issues throughout the season, but you had the very unique experience of actually, considering that this is the second year of Overwatch, you've actually been underneath a fair amount of coaches that you've had a chance to work with. Yeah. So kind of looking at that and Shock going through, how much does coaching matter for your players? Because you mentioned going through, and you mentioned the coaching changes, changing from Selfless to Krusty. Is there a huge difference between those coaches?
Yes, I think that they're best suited for different types of teams. So, okay. Brad is somebody who's I think all of the coaches I've worked with are very good. Brad is somebody that can I feel like deal with personality as well, but also I feel like he maybe would struggle with a team like Shock, which is the issue is that there's a lot of really young talent, right? I feel like really young talent needs both a figure at the top that's going to be like super, I think, hard on you, which means that he's going to say, "Hey, no, you need to listen to me now. Like this is how it's going to go." Which Krusty is somebody like that, and you also need somebody who I feel like can just provide that like 24/7 kind of guidance. Unfortunately, I think Brad was he's a better suited for like a different sort of environment, a team more like Atlanta Reign, where I feel like. They're all in a house, but they all, I think, have a good amount of autonomy. Mm-hmm. And to be fair to Brad, I think that Shock necessarily wasn't the best environment for him either, because he didn't get everything he wanted from management, right? But when Krusty came in, Krusty got actually a lot of the things he wanted from management. So it's just kind of it ended up being a better fit for him. So I think they're just very different styles of coaches, and they just need kind of different types of teams to work.
That makes sense. So how much do you think coaching affects the players that you have? So you obviously have some like raw set of talent when you get a bunch of players, and you know that there's like different potentials or low ends that they could have, and the coach is supposed to kind of mold those. How much of an effect would you say coaches have on the players that are there?
I think it's actually huge. If you look at like historically, who are the best coaches in Overwatch, right? Mm-hmm. In Overwatch League, not talking about pre-Overwatch, right? People generally accept like Pavane, Krusty, Pagion, maybe Moon last year. That probably fell off quite a bit this year. These are all people that coach were very. There's no other way to put it. Like these teams were all at the top of the leaderboards, and knowing behind the scenes details, I know that these guys are like very good coaches. Mm-hmm. Or created the right system for their team to succeed. So I think coaching is definitely very important. You're never supposed to discount from the players, right? Because at the end of the day, it all depends on the player's performance. But I feel like having the right coach for whatever team you're building is incredibly important in Overwatch.
Mm-hmm. So I could see that going in, and that kind of like when we look at like Team USA, like that's I think that's the hardest part is you see all these people kind of throwing their name in for like coaches, right? The problem is if you're on the outside voting, this is why I really actually don't like the system. I think popular vote is a terrible system for it because people don't have enough information to make actually good informed votes.
So I think one of the nice things about the way they're doing it, I believe this is the case. So for last year and this year, what they did was they had a popular vote for the top 3 coaches, and I believe it's still the same for this year. And then what's going to happen is that there's going to be like a 2-week period where you vote between the top 3 coaches, but the people voting are actually the top 150 players in the region. So I guess say for Team USA, 3 people make it through. The populace doesn't actually get to choose between those 3 people. I think generally you'll get the 3 best coaches. Maybe that's not true. You need to be good. You need to use social media for sure and be good at that. But you'll get 3. You should at least have 1 really good candidate, I think. I can see 1. I will give you 1. But like a good example, like if you think Junk Bunk's a really, really good coach, like I'm being very realistic from like where I'm saying he's not winning that. Like I would bet money right now that he is not going to win. Like because of the social media. Yeah, exactly. And I think I believe it. But he will get pushed out by other people who are considered great coaches who just have bigger brands. Yeah, that's a fair point. I can see a world where it happens, but it's just going to be really hard for him.
Yeah. So and that's what makes it kind of hard for me is like how do you start to do this and like what are the effects, because it's a really important decision if we actually do want to ever win Overwatch World Cup. Like having a good coach is probably a good starting spot there. So but it makes it kind of a very interesting dynamic. So another thing that I kind of want to talk to you about was Burnout. You did a video on Burnout. It's something that I talk about fairly frequently because of my profession. So it's something I like to bring up with guests who have decided that they want to take a loop into that topic. So you obviously worked through Shock and things didn't go the best there. You had some better seasons, you had some worse seasons, and I imagine that influenced like your topic on Burnout. And another thing that you mentioned recently is the fact that you actually would rather see teams in houses than in apartments, which
contributes to Burnout, to be honest.
And that's what I was going to say is like, how do you start to, when you look at Burnout, and that's actually the main reason why I don't like team houses is because of Burnout in handling that. And I think you can still do things to get the benefits of a team house in apartments if you do it right. But looking at that, what do you think is more important? Focusing on like Burnout and what you think the issues are with Burnout, or do you think being in like a team house is more important?
I think both are important, to be honest. Like I think, so that's a cop-out answer, but what I mean by that is I think a team house environment is the best way to get the best possible performance out of your team. Now that's definitely being surrounded by your teammates 24/7 is definitely, I think you'll definitely burn out faster, right? But that's on the coaches to manage your stress levels, the amount of time you spend practicing. So maybe if you're in a team house, you need longer breaks, you need more days off, you need stuff like that, right? I think that it's very much on the coaches to manage kind of your load, your workload, and create an environment where you're both happy. You don't feel like you're too stressed, and you also can perform super well, bond with your teammates constantly. Like, I think that's just a super important part of a coach's job that probably doesn't get spoken about very often at all. It's just kind of managing your players, their stress levels, their burnout, and when you're in a house, it's exceptionally like important, I think.
Okay. So what do you think are some of the issues that contribute to burnout? Because one of the things that people have mentioned is like the schedule change was really good. I play devil's advocate with the schedule all the time because I don't think it was necessarily the schedule that makes things good because it's the amount of time you practice.
And when you're just practicing more now, basically.
Yeah, and I called that like a long time. I was like, what's going to happen is teams are just going to practice more because they want to be better than other teams.
I actually think that this helped burnout, but only for coaches, not actually for players.
Yeah, so I agree with that.
Coaches is that you're preparing for 7 matches instead of 10, and that means you can go over less VODs basically, and just focus more on your own team's performance. And it's just simpler to go over your own team's performance, your own practices, rather than going over like 10 different other teams. You're going over only 7. You have some bye weeks where you can just focus only on your own team. And then I think it's just a bit simpler for coaches, but definitely you're still practicing more now. So you end up having like the same amount of effective time being used, I would say.
Yeah. So what do you think are some solutions to handling burnout? Because we obviously know that was not a solution. I actually think that made it worse, to be honest, because now you have less games, and so they stand for more. Because if you lose one game now, it means way more than if you lost one game last season, because it's roughly equal to like 1.35 games last year.
Yeah.
So it's way worse if you lose, and the stress that gets put on you because you've lost that is kind of like losing three games in a row. So like, what do you think is a solution? Because I have a solution that I will propose to you after you give me kind of some of your ideas.
I don't like my solution because one of the nice things about Overwatch League is you have so many championships, but I honestly think that you need to remove stage playoffs. You have an idea because you worked on Gladiators, who became a good team.
Yes.
Bottom tier teams have so much off time. Actually, it's crazy. Like Valiant had, I think, 5 weeks of off time because they had a bye week during the week 5 of stage 1. Then they had a huge break for stage playoffs, and they had the stage break. Like they had so much time off. And then a team like Titans, for example, or Shock, who didn't have bye weeks during stage 1, then played the stage finals, like the playoff stage finals, then have to do like, media with Overwatch League because they're now there's a winning team, right? So you need to go do media. Your own team wants to take advantage of that, do some media. You get like a week off tops, and we had like, I think we had like 6 days off when for stage 1, between stage 1 and stage 2. And this is like after constantly practicing for stage 1, like very little off time. 6 days off is not enough. Like your break is just gone just like that. If you take like a small trip, it's already over. I can't think of a better way to do it other than either extending the season, making like breaks between stages longer. Because between stages is, unless you're just like super hard pressing your players, which I don't think is the best way to go, you will take advantage of those breaks, I think. I mean, maybe you could even keep stage playoffs, but just make the breaks longer. But I don't know if that's feasible. I think just removing stage playoffs and making the breaks a bit longer is the best way to go about it. Otherwise, I don't have any good solutions, to be honest.
I have a solution you will not like. I'm almost positive of it. So this is the only reason I pulled this solution is because it's what's done in sports, and they've set it up with unions, and that's the only reason why they have it there is they limit practice time.
Well, I actually don't mind that. I think having an enforced, obviously you need a union before you can do anything like that, but I think having an enforced practice time, like if everybody's on equal footing, then whatever. I don't. If everybody's is in the same situation, then I don't think I should be mad, especially if it's helping the players like maintain their careers and be in better form for a longer period of time.
Yeah. So that is my solution. Is because Blizzard could do it. If Blizzard has done this weird thing, I have to give them props for this. Okay, they have made it so that way it is less likely for Overwatch League to start a players union than any other esport. And you can take that bad or whatever, but they've taken it upon themselves to implement things that normally a players union might actually go. So like standard contracts, making sure that health insurance is provided, any of these major issues that might band together a group of people, they've been like, no, we'll just take care of it. And so Blizzard could do the same thing. And they could just be like, nope, this is going to be the maximum. If you're found not in compliance with this, you get punished. So Blizzard could.
There have to be some, like, teams would definitely fight that a lot. I feel like, Blizzard can't just dictate everything without any fighting back. You know what I mean? So
no, I know. And
it's definitely, as there are definitely struggles within Overwatch League where it's like teams versus Blizzard on like a smaller scale. Not like not like rebelling actively, but like disagreement is what I mean. Yeah. So definitely, I know a lot of people would. I wouldn't really care that much, but I know a lot of people would disagree, and I know a lot of people would try and break that rule privately. You know what I mean? So it is what it is. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing because I know that people like when I say it, most people are like, oh no, we're not into that. We don't want that. If they burn out, then I want the best possible league. If that lasts 1 year, then get someone new. And
No.
I'm just like, oh, that makes me cry inside.
Yeah,
So
you know, I get their perspective, but I think that these players, like, you have to treat them well. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. You can't just drive them like I don't know. Yeah.
So another thing I want to kind of ask you about, kind of looking at Overwatch League, is I know Shock had mentioned like, oh, we're going to start up this sister team, right? Like at one point I remember you guys tweeting about that and bringing in players and having 2 sister teams. Now kind of looking at season 2, and the way that people have kind of structured teams, as well as with Academy, people just dropping their Academy teams, right? It seems that, first of all, teams don't want 12-man rosters most of the time. They don't find that super effective. And then teams don't want Academy teams really either. So it doesn't seem like there's any sort of inner scrimming or anything like that that has been found to be very effective. Would you say that that's true? And what do you think are the reasons that is?
It's just it's a really hard situation. I think a good episode for you, honestly, would be to talk to somebody who's on a roster who didn't get any playtime during Overwatch League Season 1, because their perception of things will be very different from somebody else on the team.
Yeah.
When you're a player on a team that is told, hey, you need to practice, but you probably won't see any playing time in an actual match, your whole entire goal is just to help the team and, be a part of the team. And, you won't get the fame, you won't get the fandom, anything like that, but you'll be helping us win a championship. Like, maybe some people will say, yeah, that's cool at first, but down the line, they'll get bitter. They won't like their situation. They'll want, they'll see their teammates getting so much praise and they'll want some of that praise. It's just a very hard situation for people involved. So I think everybody is kind of in that position, even if they don't say it publicly. Like, 12-man rosters are very hard to manage, very hard to make work, and you need to have a very strong coaching staff, very strong management. Like, you need to be paying people well to make that work. It's unbelievably hard, I would say. Now, like, is there a way you can make it work? Like, maybe, but even then, like, you'll see teams like Shock started out with 12 men, and Sleepy wants to play. Yeah, Baby Bay wants to play. Like, they had to trade these guys away. Mm-hmm. They're not going to be like happy just scrimming against their team, running like specific compositions, being told what to do all the time. Like, it's not a good environment for players. I feel like if you're on a 12-man roster and you're one of the players that probably won't get to play. Mm-hmm. So I feel like it's not a viable solution. Now, Academy teams may be a bit of a different scenario, but even then they're not going to be happy like just being like the practice squad and not really getting any other resources other than that. So I personally just feel like that's not worth it. You might as well just like preempt it and not have those bad feelings and not create any negativity within the team, not harm people's careers potentially. And so I feel like just having the necessary pieces on a roster is the most important thing. But, there are multiple schools of thought. Seoul is currently trying to make the 12-man roster work. I don't personally think it's going super well, but, a lot of people are saying they think it's a good experiment. So, fine by them. If they do manage to make it work, that's fair. If they don't, then I guess I told you so. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I just feel like it's such a hard situation to discuss because you have to think about how people's psychology changes over a full season, right? And I'm somebody that always tries to think from other people's shoes, like, why do you think this way? And that's kind of just a conclusion I came to from just being, I guess, that way.
I think I kind of agree. But one of the things I wanted to ask you, and this is something that I was thinking about, like when we were working with gladiators and stuff like that, is I think it was always kind of portrayed wrong. And maybe you guys didn't portray it like this, but the way that it was kind of portrayed through like most of the teams that I had heard about was, hey, you're going to be here to help practice. If you play better, you'll have a shot to play.
Yeah, but yes, that is 100% true always. But what's the likelihood somebody's going to suddenly outperform their counterpart?
But that's my point. But you throw this sense of false hope, right? Like, there's always a chance if I play better, I can get there. And maybe that's the wrong thing going in with these players. Is maybe you bring in players and be like, listen, if you join this team, you're not going to play. You're going to be here to help train them. We're going to pay you to do that. That is going to be your job. You will never see playtime.
So I agree, but in that scenario, what's the likelihood? Let's say that somebody who's just desperate, right, says yes, and then suddenly they're thinking like, wow, this is my life for the next whole year, next 2 years, or 1+1.
I think that you could make it work with that, especially if you said, listen, we'll keep you on a year contract, and that's what we're gonna do. We'll release you at that if you want. I feel like there are definitely more ways to make it work, but I don't think anyone has done it yet. So in theory, it's like, especially like thinking about the psychology, because that's all I really care about, is looking at that. I'm like, I think you can make it work if you did it this way. I'm not 100%, but I think you would have a better shot than any other way that has been done so far.
I agree. But one thing I'll add to this is that the other problem that I wanted to mention, I kind of forgot because I went on a tangent.
Yeah.
But the other problem I have with this issue is that your coaches only have so many resources they can give you. Even if you get another coaching staff for that second team, they're not as good as the first coaching staff.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to be able to get the same attention. You're not going to be able to improve at the same rate, grow at the same rate as the rest of the team. Yeah, you can improve in like team VOD reviews and discussions and stuff like that, but it's just not. I think that there's always going to be this degree of bitterness, and if you can control it, perfect. You have a good system. But if you can't, and I think most coaching staffs honestly are not equipped to deal with it. Even the best coaches have a hard time with it. I just think it's an issue.
Yeah, that would be the biggest thing that I see a problem for, is the lack of resources that are available. And the value that you get from it versus the resources I think it would cost would just not be worth it right now.
Yeah, I agree.
So what I am curious about, though, is when geolocation happens, those value systems, I think, start to shift a little bit.
It depends on how. I feel like it depends on how the geolocation works, right? Because we don't have any details on it right now. No. I don't know if it's confirmed yet, or if it's constantly changing. You know what I mean?
Supposedly.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. I'll just keep it at that. But basically, like, let's say the options that you have are, let's say, a roadshow, like what people expected at first, but then now it seems like it's leaning. What the public perception is, it's leaning towards kind of like the, what do you call it, the home and away games, like actual home and away games, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have actual home and away games, I think you're probably maximum dealing with like 30 ping, like 40 ping between the two teams. So yeah, it limits your selection of competition, but you can also get regular practice partners, I feel like, in your region, and it shouldn't be that big of an issue. Now, if it's a road show, let's say I'm a team like Vancouver Titans currently, and Shock, let's say Shock, Valiant, Gladiators are all on like the road show in China, and I can't scrim them now, then it becomes a problem, because then who's my closest practice partner? I guess like Dallas or something like that, right? So I feel like it kind of depends a little bit on how geolocation works.
Yeah,
I'm still not. I think you definitely have a better argument to do a 12-man roster or like a practice squad, whatever it is, in that case. But I'm still not fully convinced. I think there's a better argument, but it hasn't fully grasped me yet.
Yeah. So kind of looking at Shock, and you were doing all these things, and you get towards the end of Shock, and I want to ask you, how much did you know about Shock's roster for season 2 before you left?
I knew literally all of it.
Okay, so my first question for you, what made you want to leave Shock? Because you know that this roster is supposed to be very good, and I'm assuming that they were willing to keep you. If they weren't willing to keep you, then I guess that explains like everything. But I'm pretty sure they were willing to keep you.
Oh man, this is kind of okay. So I'll explain the story basically, but I wasn't convinced I wanted to leave Shock yet. To be honest, I did want to move up to assistant coach position somewhere. Or I wanted more money, obviously. Like the perceptions about how people are paid in Overwatch League is so off for season 1.
Yes.
But regardless, like, I was making very little money at Shock. I was just mostly, if I was gonna stay, I wanted at least a bump. I really enjoyed working with Krusty, with Junkbuck, with 9K, like with Chris, Derek as well. Like I really liked all the staff at Shock. I liked all the players at Shock. Like, I didn't actually have any problems with them. It's just that my ambition was I guess worth more than just staying complacent in one spot, not making any money. Like that's mainly what it was, I would say. And I wasn't even sure about leaving. But obviously we're gonna get into the DC stuff, right? So I'll just preempt it and start talking about it.
Go ahead.
I was in discussions with DC to join the team, and what ended up happening is word of this, like, my contract didn't say I had to talk to Shock or anything like that. So I was just kind of in initial discussions, they told me basically flat out, yeah, we're going to send you an offer very soon. And what happened was somebody from DC actually went and spoke to all of my Shock staff and told them, "Hey, Harsha's working for us. He's doing a really great job. Like, you guys must be sad that that you don't have him anymore." And Shock was just like, "What the fuck? Well, this guy's working for another team." So just wasn't the case at all. But then Shock was like, "Hey, like, you know, we heard about this, and you kind of need to make a choice. Are you going to that team?" And at that time I was like, wow, like this situation is so strange. But DC is promising me literally over double the money. First of all, they have no budget issues, so that's bullshit. But anyways, they're promising me over double the money, and I was just like, I either take that offer or I don't. And Shock seems like they don't trust me now, and it just seemed like the better opportunity to just go to DC. Yeah, and so that's basically, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm taking the offer. Like, I appreciate the time I had on Shock, but they're providing me something that you guys can't, and that's essentially the reason I left Shock. It was a very strange situation to be put in, and unfortunately, that's just what happened.
So this offer, and this is kind of something important to talk about, you didn't have any sort of contract. It was only, was it verbal, or did you at least have something written down?
It was written down like 7 times, I think I counted the terms. Mm-hmm. And it was never the official contract. So it was all of the terms that I wanted. It was the salary was agreed on. The salary itself was written down like 7 times. I have all the screenshots, so that's why I have it counted down. I actually got kicked from their Discord before I could take more screenshots of anything else. So unfortunate, but the salary was promised, the terms were promised, but the contract itself was never sent.
Okay, so
and it was both verbal and written down.
Okay, so did you have any sort of agent or lawyer at the time?
Yes.
Okay, so I have to ask you,
and I don't anymore. So.
Oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. So because I was going to ask you.
Agents unfortunately represent so many clients that they can't give any one client particular attention, especially if they're a coach who doesn't make that much money.
Yeah.
Especially when it's off season and they're very busy. So I don't hold any, grudges, but I definitely was in a very bad situation. Like, I was in a place where I could potentially, not have a house, because Shock was actually really cool to me, where they let me stay in their housing for an extra month, even though, even though I wasn't on the team anymore, and I lived with some of their players, so that like it could have been, they could have definitely been like, hey, we don't really want you around, and I'd have to say, yeah, that's fair. Like, I understand why you wouldn't want me around. So they were very nice to me, but like I was in a situation where I could have definitely like had to couch surf. It was just kind of a very like hard situation, I guess I would say.
Mm-hmm. So going through that, and like, when did you know that there wasn't an offer there? Because you think that everything's good, you're going through, and then all of a sudden there's nothing. Was there any build up to it, or is it one day like, hey, where's my contract? And they're like, JK, lol.
No, what happened was, oh my god, this is great. So I was gonna have a goodbye party with the rest of the staff on Shock. We were planning on going out that night. While I'm at the gym, like about to walk home, 2 hours before we're supposed to go out, I get a message from DC, and they say, "Hey, let's have a call tomorrow." I was like, "Oh, okay. I might be kind of hungover tomorrow, but I'll try and be up whenever you need me." And they're like, "Why?" And I said, "Oh, I'm having a going away party with Shock staff." And they said, "Oh, wow, this is really awkward. We can't make you an offer anymore." And I was just like, "What?" So this is literally right before I'm about to go out with the Shock staff, like for the, I guess, like presumably the last time while we're together. And I like just didn't know what to do, basically. Like, I went back to my room and just like, okay, now what? Like, I need to talk to other teams, but all the other teams have already finalized their staff. Other teams did reach out beforehand, and then all of a sudden didn't have room afterwards. So it was like a really bad situation, because I had like 4 teams talking to me before the DC thing, and I just took that offer because it seemed like the best one. And then all of a sudden, all of them had already hired the staff that they were going to take after they spoke to me, right? Mm-hmm. So it was basically a situation where I had no options, and I was just like screwed over at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super fucking unlucky and terrible. I mean, it's not really unlucky, it's just shitty. Like, really, it's just shitty. When that happens, what is like the first thoughts that are going through your head?
So I'm still very close with Brad, even though he was let go from Shock. Like
Yeah.
he still lived nearby, and we spoke like quite often. And I couldn't. I felt like I couldn't talk to the Shock staff because this was still at a time where it was like, yeah, I'm leaving you guys even though you asked me to stay. So I felt like if the only person I could really talk to in that situation was Brad, and I talked to him a lot. Like he like would always brainstorm opportunities I could take or stuff like that. That was essentially the only thing I could do though. So like I'd say like a 2 week span, I was just staying with like over at Brad's place. Like we just talk all day and just like brainstorm opportunities. But there was really almost nothing in the scene at the time.
Mm-hmm. And then you get a very lucky call from Vancouver, right? Was it out of the blue? Was it not expected?
Yeah, it was literally out of the blue. I was actually at a charity event, Tip of the Hats, the TF2 charity thing. Me, Sideshow, and Bren were about to leave for the venue, and then I get a call from Steve Maida, who's the GM of our team, and he was like, "Hey, we have a roster. I can't tell you who's on it yet, but you might kind of know these guys." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I've heard some rumors." And he said, "Yeah, we're thinking about like adding on a coach to the team, but we want somebody from like the Western side who can kind of like and who has experience in Overwatch, so you can kind of like guide them when they need it." And so it's something I told him like, "Hey, I'm talking to a couple teams right now, but this is like the offer that seems most appealing to me. Can I have like a few days time to think about it?" He actually said, "Hey, why do you want to think about it? Like look at this team. Like, look at the guys that we're gonna get. Do you really want to think about it?" And then I thought for another hour. I was like, "No, I think I'm going to take this offer." So I basically that same day I called back and I was like, "Yeah, actually, I'm just going to take the offer," and that's how I ended up on Vancouver.
Okay, like that's good. Like you're like this moment of like questioning, and you're like, I did that last time. I kind of question. Let's just not do that. Let's just kind of go for it. So you're in a very interesting situation. You are, to my knowledge, the only like Western player on that team, like, or not player, but like coach, and kind of you have an interesting title because it's not just coach, it's director of operations, which just sounds fancy. So
yeah, it does. It sounds a lot more fancy than it is.
Yeah, probably, but that's what titles do, right? They just make you sound cooler than you actually are. So, though you're pretty cool, I will say. Kind of, that's a very unique situation though, and it's got to be. If you had to best describe what it is that you do, right? Because obviously there's another, Baroy is an analyst for Toronto, who just recently actually picked up Western players. But before that, they were all Korean as well. Very unique, and I had him on the show too. It was very interesting. But you're in this situation where you're the only Western player or person on this team. What is that like for you? What is it that you do? How would you describe what it is that you do?
It's generally the standard day-to-day of a coach, but I guess the director of operations part comes in when they need either help with something that they can't do on their own because they're not from America, or kind of just like I said earlier, it's like I contribute to things by having Al experience and telling them, "Hey, like I've been in this situation before. Yeah. These are kind of the steps that we took to deal with it," and like I can kind of help them that way. The other thing is I can communicate to. It's hard for them to communicate with management, so that's the other thing I can do for them. Like if they ever have anything they want to talk to management about, they can like just bring it to me, and I'll like make sure that their problems are heard and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. Or I mean, not necessarily problems, but just whatever they're looking for can be heard by management. Mm-hmm. So that's essentially what the director of operations kind of part of my title means.
Okay, so one of the things you mentioned earlier is that your Korean was getting better. Is that something you're actively trying to work on and learn to a fluent level?
It's something I was actively trying to learn on. I had so much more time when this team was in Korea, actually. So I was studying Korean like 3 hours a day. Like really wanted to improve. I picked up Hangul, like the written language, like super fast. I think like within a day, honestly. But unfortunately, it's stalled a lot since then. I just haven't had that much free time. I'm trying to pick it up again now, but it's mostly just like conversational words that the team teaches me. I learn like just day to day, but like grammar and stuff like that, I've stalled a bit, I would say.
Okay. And so kind of like looking at that aspect, do you think that it's important? We see Toronto, we see them bringing in Western players. Do you expect more teams to kind of start to do this?
No.
I thought it was
Toronto's,
weird. I thought it was weird when Toronto did it.
I think it's a fairly weird situation for Toronto, to be honest. But I'm sure there are a bunch of owners, and I feel like you shouldn't think this way. You should just want to see the best Overwatch, right? But I'm sure there are a lot of owners that are like, hey, we need to kind of make our team more what our demographic is like, right? So maybe I'm not saying I know anything about them, but like maybe the London owner is like, hey, we need to get some more like British people on this team and phase out some of the Korean guys because we can't have we can't market to our core audience, right? Maybe down the road, investors will get enough power to make those kinds of decisions. But I think that in general, it doesn't make any sense if you want to have the best team possible. So no, I don't expect it, but maybe it could happen is basically what I'm saying.
The only way I see it happening is if when geolocation happens, they go in, they find out that they don't have good turnouts because of like any sort of marketability. Like they realize that they can't market their players in that area. That is the only time I think it happens.
So the one other thing I would say is if Korea just suddenly gets bad at this game, that's very unlikely, but Korean Contenders has been kind of given the short end of the stick very in like recent memory, and it seems like their conditions kind of just getting worse and worse in terms of how the environment is. They have less teams in Korean Contenders than they used to. Wait, actually, no, it's actually still 12. But they wanted to move to Blizzard wanted to kind of originally move to less teams, I guess. They don't have the LAN environment anymore, obviously, and they're getting even less and less LAN experience every stage. So, or every season of Contenders rather. So, maybe there's a chance that like one day suddenly American Contenders, European Contenders, Korean Contenders are all on the same level. Seeing other esports though, it just seems like Koreans have tended to become the best at whatever they do. And so I think it's unlikely, but it does feel like there's somebody up there trying to consistently make these levels even, no matter what they do.
Yeah, I will say that League of Legends, though, just recently, especially if you were watching MSI at all, like is like this is the first time though in like what 12 years, 13 years that something has changed.
It's the first time in 9 years that a Western team has won a Riot tournament.
Yeah, but even being like able to compete with Koreans, it's like, wow, this is like a first. So, okay, so kind of getting back into it, we kind of mentioned the Korea and their talent being either leveled out or evened out. One of the things I kind of want to talk to you about scouting, okay, because it seems like scouting is a hot topic that kind of comes up all the time, and we see different like perspectives or different outlooks on the way to do it. Obviously, the Vancouver Titans was like, let's just pick up the best team. Sounds like a good play, but then you have someone like Boston who seems to actually have some sort of methods for scouting. And then other teams, I don't really know what they do, to be honest. How do you think you go about scouting, and what do you think is some of the better ways to go about scouting?
I think this is actually an area I'm particularly good at because I'm somebody who really pushed hard to get Architect and Choyobin on Shock, Nevix as well, and then some of their current, like Violet, for example, is somebody I really wanted to at least try out. And after he got coached a bit by Krusty, he became a really talented player. He became like incredible, like a top 3 flex support, I would say. So, to be honest, like in terms of methods, like I have like a few eye test things where like I check whether these players are doing X, Y, and Z in game, but otherwise, like, to be honest, I just look for good players, like.
Just look for good players, lol.
It's such a strange thing to say because like I feel like people talk about it like it's a science, but to be honest, like
you think it's more of an art then? It's more about like being able to recognize certain and different patterns that these players do that like, you recognize being good.
Yes, I think it. Well, I don't know if I'd say an art because that makes it sound very. It's not. It sounds a lot more highbrow than it actually. Definitely have some like checklists and stuff like that. I definitely look at their mechanics, communication as well when they're doing tryouts. But it's just like you kind of. I feel like you get this feeling, what you're getting with players, and you have certain checklists before you try them out, certain checklists after you try them out, or certain players that no matter what you need to sign like this player because they're going to be good regardless, and attitude, good or bad, that player is just like transcendent. So I think you just kind of formulate your own list just by watching Overwatch, to be honest.
Okay, so I want to ask you a question then, and this might actually help you, depending, I guess, the answer for your Overwatch World Cup thing,
Sure.
depending on where you end up by the time this comes out, because I think the first voting stops this week, right? Today, yeah. So kind of looking at that, and maybe this will help you next year then. If you were to go about building the World Cup roster, how would you take it? Because right now, it seems like the way that it's been done, most of the times they just try out a bunch of people, they see who does the best in tryouts, they obviously invite them there, and then they kind of throw them in. Like, what makes you different from these other coaches who are going in there and doing this? What makes you better than them?
I think you have to have a system in place. You can't just, I'm somebody that if, like, obviously everybody should try out players and see maybe some players will surprise them and be better than they thought. But I'm definitely somebody who thinks that, like, I feel like there's a very clear picture of who needs to be on Team USA for this year. And there are additional people you can add on to that. But otherwise, it's like, it's a roster where you see the transcendent people in Overwatch League. And, like, I'm somebody, for example, and I'm not going to just like tell the roster, give the roster I'm building, or I would build away. But like, let's say, for example, Sinatra is somebody who's been featured in Team USA for the last 2 years, probably going to be featured again because he's, top 2 Zarya in the league, potentially the best. And he's a player I know has really, really good leadership capabilities. And he's somebody who's worked very hard on becoming a player that can, let's say, like, get the most out of their team, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm somebody that really values, I think, leadership from players, and also other players who can kind of like know all of their duties and can contribute to that without making one like big convoluted picture, right? So just having a system in place and building towards that system. And I think that's what the most successful teams build towards. You see teams like us, Titans, we're a team that has a pretty clear system. I think when you watch us, teams like Shock, for example, has a very clear system when you watch them. Teams like New York still has the same system that when they started day one from, I guess, Overwatch League, like stage 1, season 1. It's the same formula, and these are teams that have been consistently successful, right? So I think just going in with a clear idea of the piece you want to make, and then finding, or not the piece you want to make, but the whole picture that you want to make, and then finding the right pieces that'll complement what system you have in mind is the best way to go about it.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for your time being on here. Hopefully you had fun being on the show. It's a little bit different. I thought we got to talk about a lot of cool stuff about you and you as a person, a lot of stuff people haven't probably heard before. That being said, I have one last question for you. It's arguably the hardest, depending on who you are. So having been on the show and had the experience being on the show, if you could pick anyone...
Who's the next person I would want to have on the show?
Who would you want on the show? It could be anyone involved in esports. That is, they need to speak English.
I think that somebody interesting to have on the show might be actually Bren. I don't know if you've ever reached out to him or anything.
I will never confirm or deny who I reach out to, just because I don't want them to be shamed by the public if they decide not to.
Right.
But I think Bren's a good choice.
I think he just has like a very, interesting kind of road that he took to get to where he is now, and like he's somebody who's probably come a lot farther than like I guess a lot of the people in his past would probably expect of him. So I think he's definitely like a very interesting figure to have on the show, even though he seems like a very, like, just from the outside, he just seems like a very carefree, like fun-loving guy. Like there's I think more to him probably.
Okay. I think it's a good choice. I like Bren. Bren's a good person. So I don't normally do shout-outs. If you want them, you can have them. Up to you.
I mean, I guess shout out to my team and our fans, but that's about it. I don't really have anything else to say. Thank you for having me on the show, by the way. It was enjoyable.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for being on here. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I know you're very, very busy. Everyone out there watching, this has been Deep Dives into the Minds of Esports. My name is Blake Penishevitz, and until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day. And we're done.